Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be back recording the podcast again. It's been such a while. And today I have the honor of interviewing Robin Gutman. She is a therapist who works with individuals and couples with their various relationships. Robin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's really a pleasure. I know we've been wanting to do this for the last 8 months, maybe a year. And we both had different life events, but Baruch Hashem, we're doing this. Robin, so I know you work a lot with couples and the dynamics of relationships. Can you tell me what would be the number one reason people come to you? What are some of the common reasons people come to you?
Sure. So I see people for really a variety of reasons. So it's hard to pinpoint just one, but I will say that the most common reason that people seek counseling in general is because they feel like something doesn't feel right in their life, right? They don't feel like they're experiencing life the way that they want to be experiencing it. So whether it's like a more dramatic situation or even just a sense of general discomfort, I would say that's the underlying factor. Because certainly some people have, bigger reasons and major life events that push them towards it, that propel them into counseling or therapy. But really, it's not always a dramatic reason. It can just be more of a discontent that people want to address.
Do you find that the discontent comes a lot with relationships with others, or does it come from yourself? Do you find that people generally are feeling lonely and they want a life partner, or they want a friend, they want relationships, or do the problems come more when they enter that friendship or relationship?
That's a great question. So I think that people are really hardwired for relationships. Like everybody seeks it out, right? Whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's wanting to be closer to their nuclear family, like parents or siblings, whether it's the desire for closer platonic friendships, right? People are hardwired for connection. So the trouble, I think, arises when people have difficulty forming those connections. And so that's kind of what often leads people into therapy, right? It can be anxiety surrounding relationships. It could be unfulfilling relationships and they're not really sure why. It could be wanting more and not, it could be a social anxiety. There's so many reasons. But definitely wanting relationships or wanting to deepen relationships is a big part of what brings people in.
Mm-hmm. So if we have a natural desire to connect to others and we're social animals, right? We want to be with other people. I mean, one of the first things Hashem told Adam was, it's not good for man to be alone. From the beginning, from the first man, we are hardwired for connection. So if that's the case, why is it that so many of us, I mean, myself included, why do we have such a hard time when we're in these friendships, relationships, family relationships, all of that? Why do we have such a hard time connecting if we're hardwired for it?
Mm-hmm. So for people who have experienced, I'm going to say trauma, and I know that sometimes the word trauma can be overused.
Yeah.
So sometimes what I like to say instead of trauma is difficult experiences, right? Because some people are kind of adverse to saying, I went through trauma. Some people don't want it. They just don't want to label it that way. And that's fine. So let's use the more, power of term.
Yeah.
Difficult experiences. So let's say somebody went through some difficult experiences in their childhood, and it doesn't only have to be childhood, but it very often stems from childhood. I know it's a little cliched. It could technically happen, in teenagehood or young adulthood, anywhere.
Right.
So what happens is a person's sense of self can become shut down or changed, where they kind of lose their real sense of self, and it becomes overshadowed by their experiences. And that plays a role in their relationships, because the way you see yourself is kind of the way you put yourself out there, is the way you might think other people can look at you. Now, it does happen. I don't like to say that, if you don't love yourself, you can't be loved. I don't like to say that either, because it does happen that people can be surrounded by really positive influences, and that can actually help them start to believe in themselves. So it's not like you have to believe in yourself first to have a healthy relationship, although that can be very helpful. But the main thing is, like you were asking, right? If people are hardwired, why is it so difficult? And I would say it's because of difficult experiences that they may have gone through that change their perception of themselves or of relationships and how safe relationships can be. And that can make them very cautious. So that definitely plays a role.
I see. So we have, like, right now, I would say all over the media, social media, everywhere, there's all these messages to parents about how to treat your children, how to prevent them from having trauma, because if you went through trauma, then you should make sure that you don't do the same thing for your kids. But sometimes I feel like this is a lot of coddling. Let's just say, let's say someone had a very traumatic childhood, okay? And because they had a traumatic childhood, for whatever reason, they don't want to have that for their own children, right? So what a lot of parents start doing is that they'll just create a very positive environment for their kids, preventing all kinds of, problems from happening, sheltering them from quote unquote bad things. Is that the answer if we want our kids to thrive and be successful? Because I feel like that response can also be quote unquote traumatizing. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's never healthy to go to either extreme. So for me, a big part of the parenting journey, and I actually wrote a course, maybe I'll get to it one day.
Yeah.
I never implemented it, but because I think that parenting is so foundational, right? So of course, a lot of my work is kind of repairing people's experiences, and that's what I do. But when I noticed that happening over and over and over, and the things that people go through, right, it made me think, why don't we target the source? And as a parent, a person has so much influence over their child, and to be able to learn how to navigate that in a really positive and healthy way is so, so crucial. So I would say it's not about coddling, and it's not about going to either extreme, right? Being too strict. If somebody didn't have boundaries and maybe they felt like, oh, my parents should have been more on top of me or more, right? You can have it either way. The most important thing, in my opinion, is emotional regulation and validation. Those are like, so it's not one most important thing, it's two, but they're both extremely crucial for a parent to be able to give that over to their child. They really need to be able to do that for themselves first, right? It's very hard for a parent to help their child, to validate their child's emotion if they struggle with validating their own emotions. And it's very hard for a parent to help their child regulate their emotions if the parent themselves struggles with it. So that's why it's so important for a person to recognize that in themselves, heal it in themselves, and then be able to be a better parent because of doing that.
Right. But it also, like, you don't need to be like 100% healed in order to be a balanced, good parent, right? Like, I feel like maybe someone who's listening to this, like, I never got to work on myself. Like, I got married at a young age. I didn't realize I have all these idiosyncrasies, all these weaknesses. I respond to situations like this. I just never really thought about it, right? And here I am, and I'm parenting, and does it all go downhill from here? Like, how is repair possible even when you're so deep into it? You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. So for people who have experienced childhood trauma and are now working towards better mental health, more satisfying relationships, right? And that could even be with our children, and also less intrusive trauma symptoms. Maybe that's anxiety, maybe that, whatever that may look like. This is really a journey that lasts a lifetime. It's not like anybody can really say, oh, check, I'm healed, check that box and let me move on to something else. It really is a journey that lasts a lifetime. but there's so much growth that comes out of it. And I want to say for any person, whether they're a parent or not, the growth that they will see throughout the journey, I think is what gives them encouragement. And if somebody is in a relationship and their partner or their friend or their child sees that they are on this journey, that's a big part of it too, because people, I think, like to see positive change and positive growth for the most part. You know, sometimes people do struggle with boundaries very often, but that's a separate thing. But knowing that a parent is on their healing journey can be very helpful for the child, right? It's how you address the mistakes, I'll call them, that come up, right? You might take a step backwards, one step forward, two steps backwards, right? So on the journey, it's common to make mistakes. Maybe somebody wants to not yell at their child and they yell. It doesn't mean that the whole healing journey is now over. It means what they know what to do with this situation. I shouldn't have yelled. This is what I'm going to do to address it, because they're on the journey.
Yes. So what about the other way around? Let's talk about a child with a parent who is quite difficult, who is controlling, or any other characteristic traits that are debilitating for a child. And when I say child, I'm not even talking about even like an 8-year-old. I'm talking about any human being who is living under their parents' roof. So when I say child, I'm even talking about an 18-year-old or even like a 24-year-old, someone who's living with their parents, right? How does one heal or get to a place of a balanced, like a balanced place, peace of mind, when they're living with a parent or parents who are, angry parents, dysfunctional, all of that?
Yeah. So I would even expand that to saying a child who doesn't live under their parents' roof, meaning somebody could be living independently in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I have clients who are,
Oh, right. Yeah.
a big age range. So it's a great question. Your true self is so much more than your family role or the expectations that your family has or had for you. Your past identity may have started off and been formed in a certain family dynamic, most often in a relationship with one's parents, but that doesn't mean that the person needs to always see themselves in that way. So who you become actually derives more from your relationship with yourself. And I think that's very hopeful to anybody who is struggling in that dynamic, is to know that they're not boxed in just because their experiences were formed in that zone, and whatever it was.
Right.
Whether it was their home or school or, even in the workplace, people can experience negative experiences. So a big part of recovery from trauma or from negative experiences is really learning self-care and self-advocacy and learning to show up for oneself. And that's so important. Yeah,
for sure. You need to have a healthy sense of self in order to, overcome certain external challenges. If you have a strong sense of self, things won't get to you as much unless you're fragile, right? But I'm also talking about, let's say someone does have a healthy sense of self and they're very strong, but unfortunately their surroundings are just chaotic, right? They have this inner peace, they take care of themselves, they listen to themselves, and they're validating and they do everything right? But they're constantly being disturbed by the outside, meaning whether it's their family or their friends or their school environment, whatever it is. How, I know boundaries is a very, very big word right now, obviously for the last couple of years. How does one instill boundaries when they're living with a person who's not healthy, right? emotionally healthy.
Yeah. So it's not that common for somebody in that situation to feel completely secure in themselves. So that's why I would definitely say that's step one, is to learn that you are worthy of your thoughts, feelings, and opinions, no matter what the other person throws at you, so to say, right? So if somebody comes home and their parent is criticizing them or berating them or belittling them, right, they have the choice to take that in or not to take that in. I mean, obviously they're hearing it. If they can hear, then they're listening to what their parent is saying, but they have a choice if they are accepting that into their heart or not. Are they taking it in? Are they starting to see themselves through their parents' eyes, or are they able to maintain, like use the word boundaries, are they able to maintain that distance and say, that is what my parent thinks, I don't have to agree. Now, I might not verbalize my disagreement because, either that would be disrespectful or they feel like it won't be beneficial, it won't go anywhere. So I'm not going to bother, even wasting my energy on this. But in my space, I can think, do I want to take these words to her or not? And that's where you get to make the choice. And that's where that's the self-advocacy that can happen in those moments, which is very difficult.
You can choose not to be in the heat of the moment, or you can choose to say, I'm not taking part of this. Thank you very much. And maybe surround yourself with people who are encouraging you or uplifting you, or just maybe talking to someone who gets it, I guess. Right.
Yeah. So that's another important part, right? So one is keeping in your own mind, keeping yourself where you want to be. That's so powerful, especially for a child who is living under their parents' roof, because unfortunately, they might be constantly bombarded with a sense of inadequacy or a sense of failure or a sense that they're not enough or a sense that they need to take care of their parents' emotions. That's a common one too. So, right, I have to always be in a good mood, so I keep mom happy, or I mean, there's a lot of examples, but keeping in mind, like, my needs are important too. Even if, mom might not understand my needs, it doesn't mean they're not important. It doesn't mean I don't have value. And then the other thing is, what you just said about having a network, and not everybody has access to a supportive network, in person, but what people can use besides for, teachers, friends, mentors, if somebody doesn't have access to, or maybe somebody's introverted or shy or embarrassed or whatever it may be, there's books, there's podcasts, there's like a lot of online resources that people can use to surround themselves with to help maintain that sense of self.
Right. Okay, so from what I'm understanding, the way we are raised, a lot of our childhood experiences, really, it affects us. It affects us in various ways, right? How does it affect us when it comes to relationships with others?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with a significant other, a romantic partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does your childhood affect the way you relate to someone else? I know Esther Perel famously says, tell me how you were loved, and I'll tell you how you love, and I'll tell you how you make love. That's what she says. Like, there's a correlation. So can we expand on that a little bit?
So that's a deep one.
I told you I asked loaded questions.
Yeah, but it's a really good one. It's a really important one because it connects a little bit to what we were just saying about how a person sees themselves. It helps them give over in a certain way, meaning if a person, there's so many angles, so I'm just thinking about where to even start with this. One part could be the experience that a person had. They might decide, I don't want to replicate that, right? I don't want to have this kind of relationship in my romantic relationship. I don't want to have the kind of relationship I had with my dad. I don't want to have with my romantic partner, or the kind of relationship I saw my parents have is not the kind of relationship I want to have. And that's a good goal, but just observing that and just saying that is not quite enough. It's really important for a person to understand how they were affected. before they can be their best self in a relationship. I'm a big proponent of having that self-awareness. Knowing how it affected you will help you realize how you give it over. So does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Because you see it all in the TV shows and you see it with friends. Everyone's like, I don't want to be like my mom, or I don't want to be like my dad. And then what happens? Like, oh my God, I'm just like my mom. I'm being just like my dad, right? So I feel like that happens when someone is just like, I don't want to be like her. I'm never going to be like her. They're just focusing on what they don't want to be like. And then when push comes to shove and they're in a relationship themselves, they get in a similar situation, they're responding the same exact way their mother would have been responding, or their father would have been responding. But you're saying that the key is to also have a self-awareness and understanding of why you're behaving like this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or how it's affecting you.
Know your triggers. Know your triggers. Know what bothers you and know why it bothers you.
Okay, so how does one do that when they're already in a relationship? You know, they're deep into the relationship and they didn't get to have this awareness, let's say, but even let's say they did. You know, there's a lot of people after high school, they go to seminary, right? They go away and they find themselves and they learn so much about themselves. And many people who are single, they take that time to really, really work and develop on themselves, right? But then comes a relationship, they enter a relationship, and the same dances happen, right? The same dances that were happening with their mom or dad is now happening in the relationship, no matter how much they worked on themselves, no matter how self-aware they were. So, I mean, is that the only solution? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's such a great thought, because when people work on themselves, what does that mean? Does it mean they try to become more patient, more loving, more giving? And the list goes on, all the great things that people can work on. There's something underlying that I think a lot of people, I don't know if they consciously don't want to work on it, or it's a subconscious thing, or they don't even know about it. But here's what I see very often is that people have trouble tapping into their own emotions. So you can be a more giving person, you can work on becoming more selfless, and those are great skills to have in a relationship. But so often people are closed off from their real, true emotions and their authentic self. And if that's missing in a relationship, it's likely not going to go as well as you'd like it to go, because there's that authenticity that's missing. So when you're saying people work on themselves, especially like in seminar, it's such a common, people work on their mythos, people work on their character traits, and people work on, which is, I don't want to minimize the importance of that. It is important, but the little nugget that is so often overlooked is like, how am I feeling? Like, how am I truly feeling?
Right.
Maybe I'm stressed. What is my trigger? What do I do when I'm stressed? How do I navigate this? So the emotional component is often, it's often missing. It's often not the part that's being worked on, and often the part that needs to be more the focus.
For sure. But I realized that this focus tends to be more towards women. Women have all the burden of working on themselves, developing themselves, working on their midot, their character traits, how to be a good person and a good wife, and all of these things of how to improve, how to take care of your emotions. All of these things are directed towards women. And I'm seeing that there's really not so much towards men. Like men are trained to be strong and secure and being tough guys, and that's the way they have to take care of themselves, because ironically, it's also like women have been kind of trained to be attracted to that too. Not trained, but like, what's the word I'm missing? It's too early in the morning for me. Do you see where I'm getting at?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's that narrative in the world, where the man is the one who takes care of the woman, right?
Yeah, like boys don't
and so he
cry.
needs to be really strong. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like a paradox that I'm not trying to tell you to like, give me the answer. How do we solve this? But it's there. I meet so many girls who are so wonderful, who are developing themselves, and they're really like, they're such amazing girls who are self-aware and developed, and they know themselves, and they're growing and all these things. But then like, you'll talk to the guys and it's at a minimum. It's not a lot. So when a girl is so true to herself and she enters a relationship, and as you were saying, like, she's in touch with her emotions and everything, but then she's in a relationship with a guy who is completely like not in tune with his emotions, who is always trained to just be guarded, be strong, use his rationality and logic. How does that work? I mean,
so first,
it has to work.
It has to work. But first, I want to differentiate between a woman being in touch with her emotions and being emotional.
Okay,
because I have to say that I work with, males and females, and I don't want to say that females are always more in touch with their emotions. They might be more emotional. They might be more willing to express emotions, but that doesn't mean that they're always, either doing it correctly. And a lot of women are not. A lot of women are also like kind of surface level, like I'm angry, but they're not figuring out what kind of angry and why are you angry and what's making you angry and what does this connect to. And like, so I definitely see it with men and women. I'm going to say the best thing to do is kind of be preventative, so as a parent, to encourage sons and daughters to be able to express emotion in a healthy way. And as an adult, right, even if somebody's not a parent, for themselves, they can take ownership of that. They can learn to become more vulnerable, become in touch with true emotions, and not get scared off by emotion. I really see this across the board. People are scared of emotion. They're scared of acknowledging their own true feelings, and they're scared of expressing it to others.
Yeah, that's why I feel like you see so many men who maybe they're sad, but their sadness comes off as anger, right?
But women also, women too.
I really
see both. Yeah, but sadness often does mask as anger. People are angry, and when you
listen, I definitely struggle this with myself. I notice sometimes like I come off as angry in a certain environment, like I'm upset about something, but maybe it's not anger. Maybe it's just anger posing, but it's really sadness. I'm really upset about something, and I don't want to show the other person that I'm sad about it, because that will show me as weak. And if I'm shown as weak, then they're not going to like me, and they're going to be rejecting me or whatever it is. But anger is a more accepted behavior, like emotion.
Anger feels more macho than fear, discouragement, disappointment, sadness, shame, right? Who wants to feel any of those? Anger feels like I have some modicum of control over the situation, but it's just a farce. It's not really the truth.
Yeah, this is a very interesting conversation. I'm loving this. I wanted to get back to what you were saying about validation, right? And that there's validation and emotional regulation.
Mhm.
that really helps children thrive and be healthy, coping adults, right? So there's this whole thing that, like, if you over validate, then you're just encouraging this person to constantly whine and be upset about their problems. So I see this like all the time. Like, I actually had a discussion with this with someone. If they're listening to this, you know what I'm talking about. I had a discussion with someone that I'm close to, and the person was saying that you shouldn't always validate someone, right? Because when you're constantly validating someone, you're not helping them. You're just keeping them stuck in their negative cycle of constantly needing validation. But I was telling the person that no, when you're shutting down the person and you're constantly telling them, stop thinking about it, like, you're good, you're fine, like, don't worry about it, you're actually encouraging them to continue asking for validation because you're not giving it to them. But I also see that, like, if you're only validating, you're constantly validating, are you discouraging action? Are you discouraging, like, self-limiting beliefs? Are you encouraging for the child or the person to just think the way they're thinking, and that way of thinking is right? I don't know.
So I would say validation is very important for a person. If a person is in a relationship or, you know, a friendship, whatever it is, where they feel like they're validating too much, that might be time for them to look inside themselves and say, this relationship, you know, I'm playing a role in this relationship that doesn't feel right to me. So that's I want to say its own, like, its own situation
Yeah.
versus a parent validating a child, right? Like, I mean, imagine you're at the playground and a child falls off the slide and starts to cry, right? So the parent can say, it's okay, you're okay, nothing happened,
Which
right?
is the number one response, right?
Yeah. And it's so unfair because that's essentially telling the child your pain doesn't count. What you're feeling is not real. And that's the beginning of a person losing their sense of self. I guess it's okay to tolerate this discomfort, you know, as opposed to a parent saying, it really hurts when you fall down. The ground is very hard. Do you want me to rub your arm? You know, should I hold you? I want to make you feel better. Not that it's the parent's responsibility to fix all of their child's problems, but to let the child know it's okay to be hurt. And I'm here for you. I'm here to support you. A lot of times parents are so scared of their child crying or their child being disappointed or their child hurting. And a parent needs to know it's not our job as a parent to fix everything and make it all right. It's our job to be a supportive presence. That's what it's about. And if a parent struggles with being a supportive parent, a supportive presence, or a supportive parent, that's when they need to take a look inside and say, why is this hard for me? Because then it's likely a reflection of their internal self, of their experiences. Maybe they never got that, you know, and then that leads us down to, like, the inner child and reparenting.
Wow. I noticed that when a child does fall down, before the child even has a reaction, like, you're okay, you're okay. And that they do that to tell the child, don't even think about crying, you're fine, you're good. And I've gotten criticism from various people at the park or wherever it is, like, when I ran to the child and I'm like, come here. So they're like, why are you running to them? They're fine. Like, you're just making them over worry or be too sensitive. You know, sensitivity is not a trait that people really value in our society. It's looked down upon, especially for boys, right? So I feel like that also blocks people in relationships when a woman wants to connect to her husband, but her husband learned that being sensitive is not a good trait. it's a very weak trait. So that also affects a relationship. Like, as you were saying, like there's the parent-child relationship that affects the adult relationships, but I also think it's societal messages as well, and what you learned in school and your community and all of these, various factors that affect how you are in a relationship. So yeah, but as you were saying, like the parent-child relationship is the first place where they learn how to relate to others. But I definitely think like right now, the media also has an effect, your friends, who you hang out with. It's important to be aware of like where you're learning all this stuff from.
Yeah. And like with everything else, there's a balance. So if we go back to that example of a child, falling down, there doesn't have to be overextensive coddling beyond what the child needs, or complete disinterest in saying, it's okay, you're fine, and like a monotonous, bored voice. It doesn't
Yeah.
have a lot of experiences that a child will go through, right? Maybe they have a rough day at school, maybe someone could be in college and have a anxiety about a test, right? Let's use an example of an older child.
Yeah.
So a parent can say, okay, it's just a test, don't worry about it, or I know you'll do great, you always do great, which is kind of conveying like disinterest, impatience, like brushing it off, like your feeling doesn't matter. What we want, and they don't either have to be like, oh my goodness, that's so scary, like over dramatic either, but more so when a person is comfortable with emotions. And that's what I'm kind of stuck on, that idea of a person being comfortable with emotions, because it plays out in so many relationships. If I'm comfortable with emotions, right, to be able to tell your child, it's okay, like, how does that make you feel? Like, how are you, like, are you okay? And you're able to accept their response because you're so comfortable, dealing with feelings. I just spoke to my daughter, she's abroad for the year, and I said to her, if you're having a rough day, like, you can tell me, you don't need to sugarcoat it for me. I'm okay. And she's like, well, I don't want to make you like feel bad. And I said to her, that your job is not to worry about if I feel bad. Like, I'm the parent and I can handle it. Like, if something is rough, I want to be there to support you, and that's a space where it can be difficult to get to, because we can feel overwhelmed. I want to fix it. We can feel panic. That's an effect of a people pleaser. There's that residual, I hate to say trauma, but it's true. It's something that we learned, that we need to be the fixers. I need to make sure mom's happy. I need to make sure dad's happy. And then as a parent, I need to make sure child is happy, or I need to make sure boyfriend is happy, or husband is happy, or
Yeah.
but you don't. You need to be able to stay comfortably where you are and be empathetic. And that lends itself to the best, most stable relationships.
To be empathetic and
To be
what leads to
secure with
unstable
emotion.
relationships? To be
I would
secure in
say
your emotion.
to be secure with the idea of, we feel things and we don't have to fix everything. And even if you're really sad, I can sit with you in your sadness. I don't have to fix it. Like, it's okay. I can just be there for you. I don't have to also be sad, and I don't have to fix it. I can feel for you, but that's.
Boundaries with love. Right.
And it shows up even in a client therapist relationship. Sometimes clients will not want to share something. They don't want to disappoint their therapist.
I've heard
right?
about this.
And that's so interesting, because it's just showing like the greater pattern in their relationships, right? You don't have to worry about disappointing your therapist. Or if, I remember somebody once reached out and said, she wasn't my client, but she said something along the lines of, she was embarrassed to tell her therapist something. And so I encouraged her to at least let the therapist know there's something you want to share, but you're having difficulty. Let the other person in your relationship, again, whether it's a therapist, a friend, whoever it is, let them show up for you. Give them a chance. But you have to be vulnerable to do that. You have to be vulnerable, and it's difficult.
Yeah, it is. How do we do this then? If we know what the potential cure is for connected relationships, healthy, wholesome, connected relationships, how do we get to that point? if we know that it's about being in touch with your emotions and it's different from being emotional, like you said, how does one get to that place if their whole life has been about not being in touch with their emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of self-awareness is important, like working on oneself and becoming in tune with oneself. But if I had to like sum it up in a really like, sum it up in a nutshell, I would
For a
say,
podcast, yeah.
yeah, I would say you can improve relationships by bringing more vulnerability into the relationship, and bringing more vulnerability into the relationship requires you to become more comfortable with emotion and recognizing triggers.
Improving relationships by bringing more vulnerability by what? I just want to have that.
Yeah, by becoming more comfortable with emotion, recognizing your triggers, and I guess I would tack onto that, and self-awareness, and increasing your self-awareness, which
Yeah.
when I say self-awareness, I really mean emotions and triggers, because that allows you to get to know yourself. How do I feel, and what makes me feel this way? That's like real self-exploration.
How do I feel and what makes me feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this should be the question you should ask yourself when you're experiencing, even before you're experiencing an emotion, just to like prevent a lash out or a bad reaction to something that
Mm-hmm.
you've been accustomed to doing your whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have just been trained to react instead of respond. Like you said, like a lot of girls, it's not that they're more in touch with their emotions, but they tend to be more emotional because maybe they also learn to just react a certain way because that's what they saw.
Or it was more tolerated. Maybe mom had more patience for her tears and not his tears, so it was more tolerated. So it kind of becomes, it's true, right? It's a thing. People tend to have more patience for girls. They might roll their eyes and they might say, "Oh, girls," but for a boy, it might bother them more. Why are you acting this way?
Oh, of course it does. Oh my God, yeah. I have one son. I have 3 girls, thank God. And if my girls cry in public, it's like, okay, like it's normal. But if my son cries in public, I'll be honest, it's a little bit more embarrassing, or it's like, no, like you're a boy, you have to show a certain, type of emotion to people. You can't just cry in public. There has to be a good reason for it. This is what we've been taught generation to generation. So that, yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I also think that besides, what we saw in our parents' house, how that affects us, I also think where we are in the family, like whether you're an only child or you're the firstborn or the youngest, you're the baby of the family, I also think that affects the way you are in relationships. Like I'm the oldest of my family. I'm the oldest of 4 girls. And I find that because I was the oldest, I was the one that like my mom and dad gave more responsibilities to. I had to take care of my younger sisters. So I became kind of like a caretaker, right? And that affects me with let's say my friendships, my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my children. I think it really, where you are in the family, it affects you too.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But I will say that every person in the family within their own role will have their own experience, and it will affect them to some degree.
But it's not like a stamp, meaning like, exactly, just because you were raised a certain way or you had a certain upbringing, it doesn't mean that you have to continue the habits and the routines and the response, the same reactions that you had in your family.
Exactly. I just put a post on Instagram that said, like, create a new narrative for yourself.
Yes, I love
that.
It
encompasses all of this. yes, we all have as humans, right? I say this to all my clients. We all have our experiences that we experienced in our lives, right? There, however many years behind you have, things happen during those years. You've had some experiences, good, bad, pleasant, unpleasant, all kinds of experiences, right? And that forms who you are today. But also today, you get to make a conscious choice. What do I want my life to look like? And then examining triggers, examining, in certain situations, I don't like what happens to me. I don't like the way I think. I don't like the way I feel. And exploring that, and that's where therapy can be really helpful to sit and have someone help you, like, explore that. What don't you like about that? What's hard about that for you?
Yes.
What would you like it to look like? And then uncovering why, because we have these like beliefs that are ingrained in us from our experiences, be it childhood, young adult, or whatever it is. We have experiences, they leave us with certain thoughts and certain beliefs. But the really cool thing is that we actually do have the power to change these beliefs. But it's not that, and it's not instant. It takes introspection. It takes becoming comfortable with emotions. I'm going to stick with that, because I think it's so important. It becomes so helpful to analyze. It's like looking over. I'm not a sports fan at all, right? But I would imagine that people look over, if someone had a football game, they'll probably look back and say, oh, we should have done this differently. They'll analyze what they could have done differently, so they know in the future, if this play comes up, don't pass the ball to that guy, or don't run over there, right? Do something different. So a lot of times people are hesitant to delve into their past. What's the point? It was a long time ago. I can't change it. I don't want to blame my parents. And those are all, valid things to say. But I want to reassure people that going into your past and exploring it is not to blame the people, and it's not to it's not to get stuck in the past. It's to say, this is what happened. Oh, it's so illuminating. Now I know why I react this way. So let me reassure myself that I'm not in that situation anymore, that I'm safe now, that I'm okay, and giving myself permission to move on. It's so healing. It is so healing.
Wow, that's very empowering, Robin. Because I feel like in the beginning of this interview, we were talking about the root, the causes, like why these things happen. And these are very, very important to know. You have to be self-aware. You have to do your introspection. You have to know what triggers you, be in touch with your emotions, and all of that. That is all important, right? Self-reflection and self-awareness is very important. But I love how we're ending this podcast, that it's not just self-reflection, and it's not just about having self-awareness. You have a choice. You have a choice to change your old patterns. You have a choice. I love that. To bring a new narrative, like you said. So one needs both of the introspection as well as the action. You can't have only one, because I noticed that people tend to focus only on one. There's a people that stay stuck in their self-help world, right? Like they're reading like 20 books a day. They feel like they're really healing, but when push comes to shove, there's no change. There's really no change, but there's a lot of self-awareness. But then you have the people who are doing lots of external actions, but are having so much dysfunction inside and so much chaos that they're going to crash and burn, right? So you need both. And I love that message. I really love that message. And I had a great time speaking with you. And I'm sure whoever's listening to this really gained a lot from this interview. Robin, can you tell the listener where they can find you, what else you do?
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much. I really enjoyed and appreciate to have this platform to be able to share my thoughts. It's something, I do it because I love it. So, it's nice for me to be able to speak about this with you. And I hope that it helps, your listeners. I can be contacted through probably my Instagram page would be the best place for people to check out, my work and my the way I think,
Yeah.
So that's, my handle is Robin Gutman _LPC. And I also write for Project Proactive. I'm on OK Clarity. I'm on Psychology Today. So different places that
Great.
might come up. I just started writing for the 5 Jewish Times. So kind of, different mediums. And if anybody's interested in DMing me, that's, definitely something I'm open to. If anybody feels like they would like to reach out.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Robin.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.